What's going on, guys? It's Josh at Rise Above, and I'm back again today with a video on how to not get screwed by your doctors and the medical system. I saw probably 10 to 15 doctors between 20 and 21 and spent easily $15,000 on proven and experimental medical treatments. And throughout my medical journey, I learned what doctors do and do not do in order to help their patients with the highest degree of confidence possible. I came across doctors with varying degrees of competency, intellectual curiosity, and willingness to accommodate my requests. From this, I put together a few traits that you want to avoid when dealing with doctors. Let's call them red flags. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the channel, smash the crap out of that like button, and leave a comment at the end of the video if you find this helpful. Before I get started, it is important that you guys understand that if a doctor does one or more of the things on this list, it does not mean they are a bad doctor or that you should stop seeing them. This video is just to help you understand when you might need to get a third or fourth opinion. There are several good doctors out there, but if I'm being blunt, if you have a complex health condition or chronic illness, or want any type of service beyond what the standard treatments are, you will have to look around very carefully, because top-tier doctors that keep on top of the latest research tend to take cash and charge a lot of money. I'm going to start with personality traits and then move on to some more concrete items that may affect how they offer and issue treatments and the reasoning behind them. Then I'll discuss some more concrete solutions and steps you can take to get around some of these problems. Alright, so the first thing you want to avoid when you're looking for a doctor or specialist is this. Number one, they don't like being asked questions. The reason that this is a big deal if a doctor doesn't like being asked questions is it doesn't give you proper insight into their thought process, what they may be thinking, why that they're prescribing the treatments they're prescribing, or why they're ordering the tests that they're ordering. It's very important that you understand where they're coming from, what their thought process is, and why they're ordering what they're ordering. That way, if you do get a second opinion, you have a better understanding of what was being ordered in the first place, and also it gives you the opportunity to get more informed and educated on whatever it is that they're recommending. You may not have the time like me to sit around and study physiology or read a bunch of research papers, but you can go on Google and see what people are generally saying, what the general consensus is on a certain type of treatment, or you can go to somebody else and get a second opinion. So if they don't like being asked questions, that can be a problem because it doesn't give you access. They're not working with you as a partner. Which leads into my second point, number two, another red flag. If they have an ego about their work and don't listen to your concerns or input. This can be a problem because, again, it leads to a certain lack of transparency. It puts them in an elevated position where you have to do what they say and there's no dialogue. Unfortunately, if a doctor has an ego, it becomes very difficult to have a conversation about your real treatment options or what possible alternatives are, because if you ask any questions or you don't like the sound of something, they're just going to shut you down and not want to address anything. So if they have an ego about their work, that's a red flag, and if they don't listen to questions or concerns, that's definitely a red flag. Number three, not treating you like a partner in your health. Doctors are a bit different. Doctors are not quite like somebody like a mechanic, right? A mechanic, you can switch in and out. You can go to one mechanic versus another, and one may do a better job than the other, but you won't know unless there's a problem. However, with your health, there are certain times and circumstances where you really need a person who's going to work with you and be fully transparent, right? Because if they don't give you your full bevy of options, you're not necessarily going to know until later on if they made a bad call. You can get the opportunity to get that second opinion, and you end up stuck with what ended up being the work of, someone who's kind of mediocre at what they do. And this isn't to say that all doctors are like this. I think you'll find the typical doctor-patient relationship is that the patient goes to the patient thinks the doctor has all the answers, and then the doctor is also experiencing that same kind of relationship with most of their patients. So the doctor will sort of just expect you to go along with it. An ideal doctor-patient relationship is one where the doctor treats you like a partner and helps you make the best decisions for your health, your situation, and your unique biology and physiology. Next, number four, prescribing treatments right away without investigating your symptoms. This can be a problem because a lot of the time, doctors will pick up a few symptoms that may be indicative of sort of a more common issue or illness, and would just go ahead and run off and prescribe that right away. Like, better safe than sorry. The doctor's not looking to leave any room for mistakes, right? They want to avoid malpractice. They're going to go ahead and prescribe you an antibiotic for safety, just to make sure that whatever might be occurring within your stomach is taken care of. Another time I had some pain and I was prescribed Advil for 2 weeks, and I basically ended up with massive stomach pains as a result of that. Now, in that case, the guy was just treating the symptoms and not the actual problem, so it ended up causing more problems down the line. So you really need to make sure that they are looking into what your actual symptoms are, investigating properly, and not just prescribing something to either eliminate their risk as a medical provider, or not really addressing the problem in any depth and just hoping it goes away. You want somebody who's going to take an active interest in your condition or whatever issue you have, and make sure that they are getting all the information necessary to make an informed decision and provide you with the best information and treatment options possible. Typically, you're going to want to start with the lowest risk intervention, meaning treatment, and work your way up from there. So you might want to ask the doctor, okay, is this the lowest risk intervention that I can start right now? What do you think might be required in the circumstance given the condition that I have? What typically do you see with other patients who use this treatment, and what are the possible outcomes? Those are all questions you might want to ask if they basically just slap you with a prescription. You're going to want to find out more information, see what options they may not have provided to you that may cause less side effects. Fair enough. Number 5, they can't explain in simple terms the reasons for the recommendation. Now, I think the medical system does a very good job of educating doctors on what the industry standards are, and a lot of times they're taught, if the patient has this problem, you use this treatment. And there's a good reason for that. A lot of times pharmaceuticals are developed in order to address a specific problem by way of a specific mechanism of action, and it's been well studied and it has a certain treatment yield and efficacy. So that's a good reason why they may be prescribing that particular drug or treatment. However, the doctor themselves may only be familiar with the course of treatment or the recommended treatment for that specific problem, but not necessarily the reasons behind it. Now, of course, you're probably not looking to become an expert in medicine or a biohacker or anything like that, but what you do want is to be sure that they are prescribing that particular treatment or drug to you in simple terms as to why they're prescribing it, what it does in the body, and what the expected outcome is. And if you're particularly interested in some of the more nerdy stuff, you can ask about research, right? So you want someone who can explain to you, ideally, right, in an ideal world, you want a doctor who can explain to you why they're recommending a treatment, what the reasons are, what the drug does, and any concerns, side effects, etc., right? That could be important. If they can't explain in simple terms why they're prescribing something to you, that should give you reason for pause. I'm not saying that it may not be the correct recommendation, but what I am saying is that don't mistake the possibility that doctors are people just like you and me. They go to school, they learn a trade, they learn how to apply that trade. So they may not necessarily be looking into the particulars behind it. If you're really interested in getting the best care from your provider, make sure that you're asking them why this treatment. If they can explain it to you, great. If not, you may want to look at another option. Next, number 6, kind of dovetailing on the back of the last point. Number 6, they're unable to point to research that backs up their treatments. So this is not as mandatory as number 5. What you want, particularly, let's say you have a chronic illness or a complex condition or some sort of very debilitating disease that greatly affects the quality of life. You want to know the nitty-gritty of what it is that they're providing to you. You want to be sure that they're using an evidence-based approach for whatever it is they're recommending. So with an evidence-based approach, that implies that there's research behind it, and then therefore they can point to, this has been studied, here are the kinds of outcomes the patients got from using this treatment. What you want to be really wary of is getting and using sort of these very unproven treatments that, and I'm not against cutting edge stuff, but you want to be wary of going for treatments that haven't been studied in a clinical setting, right? So you want to make sure that you can find some research, and I'm not the guy to say exactly how much research that is, or under what conditions. Ideally, randomized clinical trials, and then ideally, if it's been going on long enough, you might have some systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Those are the best kinds of papers you can find. But essentially, you want them to be able to point you to some research, and that I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the ideal category. That's an idealistic thing, and not all doctors are going to be able to go like, oh sure, let me print out the research for you and it's all here. I'm going to go ahead and say most doctors probably won't do that and don't know where to look, but most doctors won't do that. Let's go ahead and put that in the bonus category. Number 7, they stick to only what they know for a fact that the insurance company will cover. And this becomes particularly a problem when you're dealing with different aspects of the medical system. Like, say, for example, you have an HMO, so you have a primary care provider who only refers you to specialists that are in network. There's more of a strict line on what the insurance company will and won't cover, and then they'll only cover it under certain circumstances, things like that. But on a personal level too, some doctors are a bit more willing to play the game, play the system. Other doctors, they're very risk averse and they don't want to piss off the insurance companies or the patient, right? Because if they send off for a patient to receive a huge list of blood tests or some kind of treatment or a scan, and it gets denied by the insurance company, the patient ends up getting left with the bill. So the doctor wants to avoid that. They don't want to get sued, any of these things, right? And that is a fair concern. However, if you have a doctor who's only going to prescribe what they know for a fact the insurance company will cover, that means that you're only going to be left with very limited options. Insurance companies have very set, predefined specific conditions under which they can order a test. Let's just say, for example, you want to check your testosterone levels. So you're concerned, you've been feeling lethargic, you're a bit tired or what have you. You go to the doctor and you say, hey, I'm feeling tired. And they'll say, okay, well, what we can do is we can go ahead and order you a metabolic panel, a blood count, and we'll look at your glucose levels. But you've been hearing recently that men's testosterone levels are going down. You've read that testosterone can be a problem when it comes to fatigue and all of these things. And you really want your doctor to just check out your T levels and make sure everything's okay. Depending on the doctor, unfortunately, if there's not a clear indication for them to test your testosterone levels, you're not necessarily going to go ahead and do it because they know the insurance company is not going to go for it. And that's a general case. A lot of doctors will go ahead and maybe they test your total testosterone levels, but they don't do your free testosterone levels. They don't check your sex hormone binding globulin. They're not looking at your estrogen levels, at your gonadotropins, your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone, all of these things, right? I mean, that's a whole separate, but there are so many different things you can look at. And a lot of care providers are not necessarily going to dig into all the data, right? If they don't see indicators that fit along with what the insurance companies deem to be appropriate for ordering a given test, they're probably not going to do it. That's why you want to get a second opinion and frankly, kind of shop around a bit and maybe put together a team. But we'll cover that later. For holistic doctors, which are a bit different, these are your DOs, your functional medicine doctors, your naturopaths, your herbalists. There are a few different issues you can run into. Number 1, using unproven and expensive treatments right off the bat. I actually did have this happen. I don't blame the doctor because apparently the treatment works for other people or had worked for other people. I later found out there's actually little clinical literature regarding that particular treatment. There was a lot of anecdotal evidence, meaning people have generally self-reported that treatment did good things for them. However, for me, it did not do good things. It did bad things for me. These holistics, these DOs, these functional doctors, of course, they are willing to work with you. They're willing to go outside the box, but you want to be careful that you're not doing something crazy that hasn't really been studied, right? Because you never know. And particularly if you have a chronic or complex illness, that's something you want to be aware of because you have a lot of different things going on in your body and there's some very complex underpinnings of whatever condition you may have. It might upset something, throw something further out of balance, etc., right? So, and of course, there are times and places for experimental treatments, but you really want to be careful and make sure that you're doing your research and you're working with a doctor who could provide you with all the information you might need to make a decision. Another portion of that is recommending expensive treatments right off the bat. This is a problem because a lot of these alternative medicine doctors, they tend to take cash, and since they specialize in a lot of what you might call heroic therapy, they will tend to use those same therapies on everyone because they saw it work with such and such a person. My doctor in that particular case, he even told me straight up, look, this may or may not work. And I said, oh, well, okay, I want to try because I wanted to get better. That procedure is very expensive. I was paying maybe $200, $300 a visit cash, or, on my card. And end result, doing that multiple times over and over, I ended up not getting the result, and I ended up with a fairly large bill. So that's the issue with using unproven and or expensive treatments right off the bat. I mentioned before, you want a doctor who's going to do the least invasive, most cost-effective treatment first, and then work your way up. So you want to start off with things that are easy to implement right off the bat, and then work your way up to those more expensive treatments as you go along. Number 2, following up from that, not customizing your treatment or protocol or testing. A lot of doctors will have sort of a standard protocol they run people through, especially if they're new patients, and that's fine. But they'll run the same protocol on everybody, and they won't, and they'll just focus on, like, say, key blood markers that they believe to be necessary to optimize health. Maybe you have a doctor who's really focused on getting your carbon dioxide levels down, or your high sensitivity C-reactive protein down. Things like that. It's all well and good, and it's important to optimize blood markers and things like that, but of course the body is always and always will be a variety of systems working together. So if you over-fixate on specific markers without a clear reason, it's a clear indicator that they're not really taking a whole systems approach, but just trying to treat markers and not necessarily to resolve symptoms or get remission, things like that. A lot of people who have complex or chronic illnesses may run into this problem when they have doctors who will look at specific tests that they run and find that the result either is or isn't there, and they may rule out any further, they may rule things in or out based on that. Patients with chronic or complex illnesses may run into this problem because you end up with doctors who they treat to the numerical value instead of treating the patient and how the patient feels and the symptoms. Of course, numbers and data, very important information, but you need to also pair that with how the patient feels as well. And take that into account. You need to have a whole systems approach, ideally. And again, this is an ideal situation, but I know people who have chronic and complex illnesses, they end up with some doctors, they just treat to the numbers and they don't end up feeling any better. And the doctor may fixate on the specific value, and that doesn't help them out. Number 3, if they believe all pharmaceuticals are the devil or believe that all herbs are pseudoscience. You want to avoid the extremes, right? I was once on the all pharmaceuticals are the devil side of things, and now I've taken on a more well-rounded approach. I actually believe that pharmaceuticals are the best way to treat specific diseases. Pharmaceuticals are good for acute treatment, and herbs and things like that can be better for sort of more long-term health and holistic care, right? What you want to do is avoid a doctor who's completely against pharmaceuticals, because you could be losing a good bevy of different treatment options that really, really work. I took a lot of herbs, and I took all the herbs I was recommended, herbs, supplements, vitamins, you name it. I took all of these different things. I was spending like $300 a month on supplements, wasn't feeling any better, and then I started taking the pharmaceutical. I had to wait a bit for the effects. Probably within the 3 to 4 weeks, I had to wait for it to start working. Massive improvement. I felt so much better than I had the entire time I had that specific issue. So sometimes you do need a pharmaceutical. You wanna be careful with doctors who completely rule that stuff out. And that's an excellent example of that. I was spending a ton of money, and all I really needed for that particular issue was just one pill. I pay $6 a month for the prescription through my insurance. So, and then for the herb side of things, there are doctors on the other side of the equation who think that everything is strictly by the book, and herbs are unproven, unresearched, difficult to track, measure. The effects are very hard to locate, and that's all true, but they could definitely help people out. And I think if you want to be wary of having an extreme perspective. So I know there are a lot of people online that swear by a certain herb or supplement. If you see people say like, this item changed my life. So you definitely don't want to rule things out. You want to have a curious, open mind and be willing to try different things in partnership as a doctor and as a patient. So I think there are certain times when pharmaceuticals are called for. If you don't have sort of an acute need for a pharmaceutical, maybe you can look at something that's a bit more herbal or something like that. But I think it's important to point out pharmaceuticals, of course, the things get added to them, but the compounds themselves in a pharmaceutical drug are just extracts from things you find in nature. So and even still herbs can have side effects themselves. So if you eat, for example, if you eat the wrong bush, you're gonna die. So you're gonna die. All right, so these are all very important signs to make sure you look out for when dealing with any doctor. Now onto how to get around this. So number one is you want to take a mix and match approach, build a team. So if you have the ability, then you want to probably see a couple of different doctors. So that might be primary care providers. You might want to go visit a few and work with people, different specialists, until you can find doctors that you feel work with you and treat you in a way that you think is conducive to your best care. This is your health after all, so it's something you want to be proactively involved in. You don't want to be taking a backseat. You don't want to be just told to shut up and take the treatment or whatever it is, right? So in my case, I have PPO insurance, so that means that I can kind of go see different specialists without a referral. I can see different primary care providers as long as they take my insurance, all these different types of things. You can see different providers within the same network without a referral. So there are options there. And when I say take a mix and match approach, for example, you see a dermatologist, you're not very satisfied with their recommendations, or they won't take a second look at something, they're not willing to run a test, maybe wait 3 or 4 weeks and then go see a different dermatologist and get a second opinion. Things like that. That way, so you don't have to sit and just assume that what they're saying is correct if you feel uncomfortable or do you feel your concern is not being addressed. So over time, you do this sort of mix and match approach. You can put together a team of doctors that you have for different things, kind of like you might have on a basketball court. Number two, get second, third, and fourth opinions. That kind of falls in line with number one. Again, if you're not comfortable with something or you have questions or doubts about something, you're seeing some of these red flags that I mentioned in the video and you're kind of questioning what the doctor's been saying or what they're recommending, don't hesitate to get that second, third, fourth opinion. You can even go on some of these websites that you can ask questions in real time to doctors. I'll include that here on the screen. I have one that I really like, but I can't remember what it's called, so I'll put it here. Those aren't legally, real consultations, but you can get real answers from real doctors, and you can ask as many as you would like. You do have to pay for them, but you can ask those questions. I've had some experience there getting some really great answers from neurologists. So number three, if you can't afford it, don't use an HMO network. If you have the option, use an EPO or a PPO. If you do use an HMO, keep searching until you find a cooperative primary care provider. Like I mentioned before, HMOs who are assigned a primary care provider, you have to work with that person to get treatments and tests, and if you want to see a specialist, they have to refer you to somebody. So if you're in an HMO, I believe you can still swap out your primary care provider at a certain point, and you can keep looking until you find somebody who you like and takes you seriously and has an invested interest in your health. Might take a while to find that, but that's something you can do. If you have the EPO or PPO, you have more flexibility. If you have PPO is the one that actually has the most flexibility, which is what I go for. And with that, you can go to a specialist. You don't need any referrals, any of that. You can just make an appointment with a specialist and go see them. And finally, number four, take an interest in your own health and get educated so you can participate in the conversation. Like I've said before, you don't necessarily need to take my level of interest, but just paying attention, when a doctor recommends something to you, maybe research it a little bit. Go on Google, see what you can find out, see what other people are saying about the treatment. Go on one of these websites I'm talking about, ask some doctors. If you have a relative or a friend who's a medical professional, see what they think about it. Don't necessarily just take what the doctor is saying at face value. And even if you trust them, you know, it doesn't hurt to just research, right? Because you get more informed and educated, you can make better decisions, right? Look at it like your financial life. If you don't get informed and educated on what the best strategies are to improve your financial health, you're not going to have better finances. And the same goes for your actual physical well-being as well. Above all, doctors are human beings. They're prone to the same shortcomings, biases, and logical fallacies that plague the rest of us. It's best to take this into account when looking for a real partner in your health. So build a team, get alternative opinions, and find doctors who are willing to listen to you and assist you in your search for answers. Like I said, if you can afford it, avoid the HMO and do your reading. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a thumbs up, and a comment in the comment section. I really appreciate it, so this video can help find more viewers. Other than that, I will see you guys in the next video.